Up until very recently, if we said we were talking about an Isuzu, you would have thought we're going to be looking at a truck. But over the past few years, the Japanese manufacturer has been making some pretty solid sales inroads with their D-Max utility and this, the MU-X SUV. It's only been on sale for less than 3 years, and already it's outselling such established nameplates as Pajero, Pathfinder and Patrol. So what is it that makes the MU-X so appealing to buyers? Let's find out. Now, there's a choice of 3 trim grades in the MU-X lineup and 2 an all-wheel drive. This is the top spec LST 4x4, which is pretty important because, as you can see, we're not at the shops. Now, being a truck manufacturer, you won't be surprised to find a truck engine under here. This is a 3-litre turbo diesel with 130 kilowatts or about 175 horsepower and 380 newton meters of torque. Now, while those numbers may not sound that impressive on paper, the 4JJ1 engine's got a great reputation for efficiency and reliability, which is pretty important if you're doing a lot of miles. One thing to note though is the Isuzu has a 10,000 kilometre service interval, so it's something to bear in mind before heading out on a big trip. Well, up here in the cab, to be honest, it's pretty honest. There's a lot of cheaper and hard scratchy plastics, and the layout and design is already looking pretty dated. There are no fancy bits of technology like driver assist systems or even automatic headlights or wipers. You do get this cool 8-inch touchscreen in the centre of the dash though, that as well as having Bluetooth phone and audio support has a relatively surprisingly well-featured navigation system, which has got some fun functions, like you can see where on earth the sun is at any point in time, and my favourite, a miniature little MU-X pictured on the map at any moment in time. Now, around the cab, the seats themselves, well, the leather is a little bit cheap, but they're relatively comfy. They could do with a little bit more support, but there is plenty of storage. You've got a centre box, twin cup holders, a top box, 2 glove boxes, and my favourite, these cup holders next to the vents on either side, which is really cool in summer because you can point the vents down and keep your drink cool from the air conditioning. Let's check out the back. Right, well, the LST has side steps, which allows old people like me to get into the back with ease, where there is plenty of room. The driver's seat is still in my position, and I have stacks of knee and toe room, as well as a heap of headroom, which is pretty impressive considering there's a 10-inch flip-down LCD monitor here, which can play DVDs from the system up the front. Also in the roof, there's part of an 8-speaker surround sound system. You get vents and even fan controls for the air conditioning back here. The seats themselves are actually reasonably comfortable, and you do get a centre armrest with twin cup holders. There are mat pockets on both sides, but no 12-volt outlets. Let's check out the third row. Well, I've got to admit, it's pretty snuggy back here. There is room enough for me on short trips, but honestly, this is probably best kept for kids. You still get vents, they can still see the flip-down monitor, and there's cup holders and storage cubbies back here. But once we have a look at the amount of boot space behind with all 7 seats in play, you're probably best considering these as sometime seats. Right, well, now I've unfolded myself from there. Have a look at this. There's only 235 litres of space with all 7 seats in play. Now you can fold them down 50-50 and then 60-40 to expand to over 1,800 litres of boot space, but we'd recommend running the MU-X in a 5-seat mode. The other thing to be wary of is, and you'll note, I'm cowering under the tailgate here, it doesn't actually lift up that high, so if you're over 6 foot, watch your noggin. Now, before we hit the road, there's one key difference between the D-Max utility and the MU-X here that we need to cover, and it's under here. The MU-X has a coil-sprung multi-link rear end as opposed to leaf springs on the back of the ute, which gives the SUV a lot more road-going compliance, comfort and stability, while still affording some pretty decent off-road articulation. In fact, let's put that to the test. As we're rolling here in the MU-X, you might have been thinking during the introduction, not really sold on the exterior design of the big guy. And look, we do have to agree with you. It is more conservative than the likes of, say, Mazda and some of the Europeans who are going for a much more funky approach. The colour that we have ours in is the pearl silky white, and one of 6 options that you can choose from. Now, having the Isuzu truck engine up front is either a blessing or a curse, depending on how enamoured you are with big heavy vehicles, because it does sound like a truck. You get that telltale whistle from the turbo, a lot of induction noise and some pretty solid clatter both on the move and while it's stationary. Touring noise levels aren't that bad though, they're in line with what we've seen from other diesel pickup based SUVs, but it is something to keep in mind. Just turn the radio up. Now, one of the things about the Isuzu's 3-litre turbo diesel is it's operating well within its comfort zone. That 130 kilowatts and 380 newton meters basically means the engine is relaxed all the time. It's been designed to work so that it's reliable and economical. We see some pretty impressive fuel claims from the MU-X, particularly on touring cycle, where it will dip well below 9 litres per 100. We've been idling a lot today, which has kind of thrown our consumption figures out a bit, but it's still relatively efficient for certainly a 3-litre. Driving the MU-X, it's not a sports car. It can pick up and hold speed quite well, certainly within speed limits, but it's not going to set your hair on fire. Now, driving out here today on the highway and on some more windy touring roads, the MU-X certainly shows where its strengths are, and touring is definitely one of them. You can sit on 100 kilometres an hour with the cruise control system active in the car and manage some pretty efficient fuel consumption cycles, and it's a very effortless and comfortable cruiser. Mountain roads tends to start to show its capability gap, I guess you could call it, and you need to measure your speed and take it a little bit easy, otherwise you get a bit of squeal from the tyres if you're going a little bit too quick. Now, of course, one of the key reasons you're going to look to an MU-X as opposed to any other SUV is because you want to go off-road. Now, we're making our way down a pretty hairy trail here at the moment, and we'll stop to put the car in low range just for safety's sake. And we've been through here plenty of times before, and we know that this is something that the MU-X can do basically without breaking a sweat. And particularly if you're taking the kids for a bit of weekend four-wheel driving adventure, you can go through a lot of bumps and splashes that certainly look a lot more challenging than they are without even having to worry that the car's going to have any problems. Now, the MU-X has got an on-the-fly switchable four-wheel drive system to go from two-wheel drive, which is at the rear, to four-wheel drive high range. You've got to stop, pop the car in neutral if you want to go to low range. There's no rear differential lock. The low range system actually does a pretty good job of it as it is, nor is there a hill descent control program. So you do need to drive the MU-X when you are off-road, but it's certainly not challenging to do so. Now, we're going through a muddy puddle here, and you can see we're bouncing around. The car is just eating it up. It's a very slippery road. You can see I'm working quite a lot on the steering wheel. It is a very light steering rack, we've got to say, particularly on muddy sections like this. You will be working quite hard on the MU-X. It's not a tight race car type feel, but in a way, off-road, you want that. You don't want the most minor correction to be forcing you off your chosen path. You want to be able to make decisions around the terrain around you so that you can choose the best and safest path to get through. Now, suspension travel is something that we obviously look at when a car is dealing with a lot of off-road work. And as we go over some pretty decent bumps in this thing, it's actually doing a really good job. There's coils all round. It's a multi-link rear axle, as we saw earlier at the rear, that allows you some pretty decent articulation for some more challenging terrain that we're going through now, while still being able to get through without too many problems. Now, in standard form 2, the MU-X has got a 230mm ground clearance. It is lowered by the side steps that we have on this car. They do make getting into the back a lot easier, particularly for small children. But if you are going to head off-road, we'd recommend perhaps swapping them out for some rails because they're going to certainly last a lot longer and are not going to be so susceptible to ruts and other bumps. Entry angle is a pretty solid 30 degrees with a 25-degree departure angle. That's going to change though if you've got a tow hitch at the back, so you just need to be mindful of what you're coming down. And that's the thing, for a consumer level family SUV like this, you are probably going to have the kids on board. You're not really going to be trying to scale the most extreme four-wheel drive tracks, particularly in a standard trim vehicle. We're still on road tyres, by the way. But everything we've done today, it would certainly keep the little ones amused, and the car is doing it all in its stride. So we know that the MU-X is certainly very capable. Yes, it's a bit trucky. Yes, it's a bit simple, but it's also pretty good value. This car, with all of its features, which may not be up to the flashy standards of some of the Europeans, is currently available for around $51,000 drive away. So it's a full-featured, 7-seater, diesel, very capable off-road SUV with plenty of space and a 5-year warranty for a bit over 50 grand. It's pretty good value in our book. Bottom line though, is coming through mud and ruts and things like this. It's an awful lot of fun. So if it is something that you're thinking that you do like to do, certainly on weekends, as a bit of getaway from town and certainly a bit of stress relief, a vehicle like the MUX that has the capability to do this without even worrying about it is certainly worth it. Well, we've had some fun today getting the big guy nice and muddy, a little bit dirty. Most importantly though, the Isuzu MUX has not skipped a beat. Now, if you're looking for a more urban focused, slightly more refined, luxurious SUV, there are better options on the table. But if you see yourself doing a lot of touring miles, perhaps towing something, or coming out here to get away from it all for a bit of a weekend adventure, then the 2016 Isuzu MUX might be a little bit basic and rough around the edges in places, but it's good value and it's definitely capable.